If you've Googled why am I losing hair at 1 a.m. while running your fingers through your scalp under a bright bathroom light, I need you to stop doing that. Not because it's dramatic, because you're looking for evidence and panic is a terrible scientist. Here's the truth nobody tells you in the first 10 seconds of every other hair loss video. There is no single cause of hair loss. There are at least 6 distinct mechanisms. They show up differently in men and women, and most people are treating the wrong one. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly which one applies to you and what actually does something about it. Let's go. Here's why this is more confusing than it should be. You see an ad for a shampoo, you see a guy on Instagram swearing by biotin gummies, you see a forum thread where someone says rubbing onions on your scalp regrew their hairline, and somewhere in there, a dermatologist's actual explanation gets buried under 40 layers of marketing. So people do the worst possible thing. They treat the symptom blind. They buy a thickening shampoo for hair loss caused by a thyroid issue. They take biotin for genetic pattern baldness, which biotin does nothing for. They wait it out, assuming it's stress, when it's actually an autoimmune condition that gets harder to treat the longer it goes untreated. Quick gut check, and I want you to actually answer this in your head, not just nod along. Is your hair loss happening gradually over years, or did it show up suddenly in clumps over a few weeks? Hold that answer. It's going to matter a lot in about 12 minutes. Here's the part that should actually motivate you to pay attention for the next 18 minutes. Hair loss is one of the few health issues where time is the active ingredient you're wasting. Hair follicles don't usually die overnight. They miniaturize, slow down, and eventually go dormant. And most treatments work by intervening before that dormancy becomes permanent. Diagnose late, and your options shrink. Diagnose early, and you have real leverage. So let's actually diagnose this properly. This is the big one. It's responsible for the vast majority of hair loss in both men and women, and most people just call it male pattern baldness, which is technically wrong because it affects women too, just differently. You have a hormone called DHT, dihydrotestosterone. It's a byproduct of testosterone. If you're genetically sensitive to it, and this is inherited from either side of your family, not just your mom's dad, that's a myth. DHT binds to receptors in your hair follicles and shrinks them. This is called miniaturization. The follicle doesn't die immediately, or it produces thinner, shorter, weaker hairs with each cycle until eventually it stops producing visible hair at all. In men, it follows a predictable pattern, receding at the temples, thinning at the crown, often meeting in the middle. This is the Norwood scale, and it's why male pattern baldness looks similar across basically every man who has it. In women, it's almost never a receding hairline. It's diffuse thinning, usually starting at the part line where your scalp becomes more visible, but the frontal hairline stays mostly intact. This is called the Ludwig scale, and it's a huge reason women get misdiagnosed. They don't fit the bald guy image in their head, so they assume it's something else. Let me kill a myth right now because it wastes people's money constantly. Wearing hats does not cause this. Masturbation does not cause this. It is not testosterone making you go bald faster in some general sense. It's specifically about follicle sensitivity to DHT, which is genetic. You can have high testosterone and a full head of hair your whole life if your follicles aren't sensitive to DHT. What actually works here? Finasteride and minoxidil for men. Minoxidil and sometimes spironolactone for women. These aren't cures, they're maintenance. Stop taking them and the process resumes. That's not a flaw, that's just how it works, like blood pressure medication. This is the sudden shedding answer to the question I asked you to hold on to earlier. Hair grows in cycles. Anagen, growth. Catagen, transition. Telogen, resting/shedding. Normally about 10 to 15% of your hair is in the resting phase at any time. Telogen effluvium happens when a shock to your system pushes a much larger percentage of hairs into that resting phase all at once. The shock could be a major illness or high fever, surgery, significant weight loss, childbirth. This one's extremely common and extremely under-discussed. Severe emotional stress, starting or stopping certain medications, or crash dieting or nutrient deficiency. The telltale sign, it happens 2 to 3 months after the triggering event, not during it. So people get confused. I haven't been stressed lately, but the trigger was 3 months ago. Your hair has a delay function built in. The good news, this is usually temporary. Once the trigger resolves, hair typically recovers within 6 to 9 months, no medical intervention required. The bad news. In some people, especially women, it can trigger or unmask underlying androgenetic alopecia that was already starting. Two causes can stack. Here's a number worth knowing. Losing 50 to 100 hairs a day is completely normal. That's not a typo, and it's not me reassuring you. That's just baseline biology. If you're panicking over your shower drain, you might be pattern matching normal shedding to a problem that doesn't exist. The real red flag isn't more hair in the drain. It's visible thinning, a widening part, or a receding line you can actually track over months with photos. This one's different from the first two because it's autoimmune, not hormonal or cyclical. The mechanism, your immune system mistakenly attacks your hair follicles, treating them like a threat. It typically shows up as sudden, well-defined round or oval bald patches, most commonly on the scalp, but it can affect eyebrows, beards, anywhere there's hair. It affects men and women roughly equally, which makes it different from the first two causes. This one isn't really sex differentiated in the same way. It can also be unpredictable. It might resolve on its own, recur, or in rarer cases progress to total scalp hair loss, alopecia totalis, or total body hair loss, alopecia universalis. Why this matters? Because it's autoimmune, it often correlates with other autoimmune conditions, thyroid disease being a big one. If you notice sudden round patches, this is a see a dermatologist soon situation, not a wait and see one, because there are now actual treatment options, including newer JAK inhibitor medications that weren't widely available a few years ago. If you take one specific action item from this entire video, let it be this. Round, sudden, well-defined bald patches are not the same problem as gradual thinning, and treating them the same way wastes time you don't need to waste. This is where a lot of people get falsely hopeful or falsely dismissive. Nutritional deficiencies that genuinely affect hair include iron deficiency, very common cause in women, especially with heavy periods, vitamin D deficiency, zinc deficiency, protein deficiency, rare in developed countries unless restrictive dieting, and severe prolonged biotin deficiency pan, which is genuinely rare. This is why biotin supplements barely help most people because most people aren't actually biotin deficient. Medical conditions worth knowing, hypothyroidism and hyperthyroidism can both cause diffuse thinning. PCOS in women, because it affects androgen levels, can cause androgenetic pattern thinning even in younger women, and certain medications, including some blood thinners, retinoids, antidepressants, and blood pressure medications, list hair thinning as a side effect. The honest take. If your diet is reasonably varied and you don't have a diagnosed deficiency, megadosing biotin or collagen is mostly placebo with good marketing. But if you genuinely have low iron or an undiagnosed thyroid issue, fixing that root cause can meaningfully reverse hair loss, and no topical treatment will fix it for you. This is the category most worth getting actual blood work for instead of guessing. Real quick, if you've been thinning and also dealing with fatigue, gut and a cold intolerance, irregular periods, or unexplained weight changes, that's not a coincidence pattern to ignore. That's a go get blood work pattern. A basic panel, thyroid, iron/ferritin, or vitamin D cost less than most of the supplements people buy trying to guess their way out of this. This is the only category on this list that's largely behavior driven rather than biological. The mechanism. Constant tension on the hair follicle, from tight ponytails, braids, weaves, extensions, or even consistently tight hats, causes traction alopecia. Over time, the follicle becomes damaged enough that hair stops regrowing in that spot, particularly along the hairline and temples. This disproportionately affects women and is especially common with certain protective hairstyles worn tightly or for extended periods, which is a real equity issue in dermatology. It's historically been understudied and underdiscussed. The window matters here too. Caught early, traction alopecia is often reversible just by changing the hairstyle and reducing tension. Left long enough, the follicle damage becomes permanent, the same way prolonged DHT exposure does. So let's bring this together, because here's the actual decision tree you should be running in your head. Gradual thinning over years, runs in the family, almost certainly androgenetic alopecia. Get on minoxidil/finasteride conversation with a doctor sooner rather than later. Sudden diffuse shedding 2 to 3 months after a major life event. Probably telogen effluvium, give it time but track it. Sudden round well-defined patches, likely alopecia areata. See a dermatologist, don't wait this one out. Thinning plus other symptoms, fatigue, cycle changes, cold sensitivity. Get blood work before you get a hair product. Thinning specifically at the hairline and temples tied to a tight hairstyle. Traction alopecia, change the style now before it becomes permanent. The pattern across literally all 5 of these. The earlier you correctly identify which one you're dealing with, the more reversible it is. Every single mechanism on this list has a still reversible window and a now it's permanent window. The hair loss industry profits from you guessing. A 15-minute conversation with a dermatologist usually ends the guessing entirely. So here's what I actually want you to do with this video. Not smash that like button, an actual action item. If you're seeing real changes, a part line that's wider than it was a year ago, photos that show a difference, patches or shedding that hasn't slowed down after a few months, book a dermatologist appointment. Not a hair loss clinic that's also selling you supplements. An actual dermatologist. Bring photos from 6 months ago if you have them, because visual tracking is more reliable than memory. If you want the follow-up video where I break down exactly how minoxidil, finasteride, and the newer treatments actually work, what they do at the follicle level, realistic timelines, and what side effects are actually common versus internet exaggerated, that video is coming, and subscribing is how you don't miss it. Drop a comment with which one of these 5 categories matched what you're dealing with. It genuinely helps me know what to cover deeper next, and it might help someone else scrolling through these comments trying to figure out the exact same thing you were Googling at 1 a.m. I'll see you in the next one.